following program contains adult themes. Some scenes may be too intense for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
This is not a marquee promoting Charles Bronson's movie of the 1970s. Rather, it's a sign congratulating Bernhard Goetz.
I think that stories that catch the attention of New York City are never really just about the actors who are involved.
For a period of time, I was a cold-blooded murderer.
Ultimately, this was just about race and crime in New York City.
This is not a hero. This is a shooter.
Nobody wanted to talk about anything other than Bernhard Goetz.
If this is America, the home of the brave, don't you think it's about time some of us start acting brave?
10-10 shots fired, City Hall building.
We need police right now.
All 5 boroughs are dying. This is Crime City.
A real-life soap opera has kept New Yorkers glued to their TV sets.
It was an act of retribution in a city where muggings on the streets and in the subways are daily realities.
I was working that weekend when we heard about a shooting in the subway.
The shootings took place on a moving subway train in Lower Manhattan.
It really shocked the city.
4 men, 3 wielding sharpened screwdrivers, approached a lone man on a subway train demanding his money.
Guys allegedly asking for $5, and he shoots.
He pulled a revolver, went into a marksman's stance, and gunned them all down.
What struck me was he was prepared to do maximum damage to somebody.
2 of the teenagers are at Bellevue Hospital. The other 2, most seriously injured, are here at St. Vincent's, both in critical but stable condition.
The man told the conductor of the train, in his words, "They tried to rip me off," and he jumped from the train and fled.
Some people identified with it because they really were tired of the crime in the city.
A 13-state alert went out for a tall, blonde suspect, but a large segment of the New York City public roundly applauded the gunman's actions.
Wow, this is, a skinny Charles Bronson.
Police Commissioner Benjamin Ward denounced press reports comparing the shootings to the movie Death Wish, in which Charles Bronson rides the subways attacking muggers.
This isn't Hollywood. It's real life, New York. And there is a criminal code, and he violated that.
Stand by for updated description.
From eyewitness accounts, police made this composite sketch. No suspects as yet.
On board the number 2 IRT train on this Christmas Day, the same train where the Vigilante did his thing, the reaction was strongly in favor of taking the law into your own hands.
A vigilante is judge, jury, and executioner.
Call him a mad vigilante.
Back in the late 70s, when the city, New York City, was falling into the abyss, when there was anarchy in some neighborhoods and gangs ruled, people, by sheer necessity, had to become vigilantes because there was no security, no cameras. You were on your own.
How do New Yorkers feel about fighting back, especially down here in the subways? You think it's okay to carry a knife or gun to defend yourself?
Yes.
And
yes.
Will you?
Yeah, if I have to, I will.
People just felt unsafe going into the stations, riding the subway, coming out.
When they're out on the platform, they're like the turkey with the giblets and the gravy ready to be plucked on Thanksgiving.
There was a common perception that if you went down into the subways, you could pretty much bet that you were going to be robbed.
Oh, every day is D-Day down here. Yeah, every day.
It's like the Wild Wild West.
The number 4 train, the Muggers Express, the 2 train, the Beast, the D train for danger. I could go on and on.
I got mugged just 2 weeks ago myself. A guy put a gun to my head. If I had one, I would have used it.
It is a time in this city when fighting back makes headlines, when the word vigilante is synonymous to some with a brand of heroism.
Anybody who these little hoodlums try to accost, if they have any means to protect themselves, they should.
It does become this good and evil battle that's happening.
Police have circulated a sketch of the gunman and have established a telephone line for tips. But more than 1,500 people have called in to express support for the shooter.
I was mugged once on the subway, and I just believe, let the guy go. I think it's great.
Universally lionized. I mean, everybody said, who is this guy?
Could the vigilante actually be an off-duty New York City policeman? That's what the brother of one of the victims thinks.
Come on, you gotta be a marksman or something. only police officers or mafia can shoot like that.
In one sense, it makes no difference who the vigilante is. What really is significant is that thousands of New Yorkers are so fed up with punks and crime that they think the shootings are great.
He was right.
He was right.
He was right.
To do the shooting.
Yeah.
It was the talk of the town. Nobody talked about anything else.
An angry Mayor Koch said that the gunman, when caught, must suffer the consequences of his acts.
No one can, with impunity, take the law into their own hands and give instant justice. We will not permit it.
He turned himself in at Concord Police Headquarters and indicated to our on-duty watch commander that he was the person responsible.
When Bernhard Goetz jumped off of that number 2 train and ran into the darkness of that tunnel and then disappeared for a while, who knew he was up in New Hampshire?
The break in the case came today when Goetz walked into a police station in Concord, New Hampshire, and confessed.
When he emerged and we began to see him talking.
It's true. For a period of time, I was a cold-blooded murderer.
And that was just creepy. That was just creepy and scary to listen to. Even before we had any idea who he really was.
It's all very cold-blooded. He said it's going to offend everyone.
This is the home of the man who police say has admitted to the subway shootings. Neighbors and workers were shocked and surprised that one of their own could be the vigilante.
And what type of person is he like? Very quiet, very to himself.
This guy was the consummate geek. He lived in his own little world.
They say he lived alone in this one-bedroom apartment.
He's very smart. He's an electrical engineer. He works for himself.
He didn't look like the kind of guy that would go ahead and shoot down 4 guys. I mean, that's probably the reason they picked on him.
So if I'm a thug, man, this is the Vic, as they call him in the streets, the perfect-looking victim.
He was thin, with glasses, nerdy.
If you had that certain look, that's it, man. You are a human piñata.
The suspect was apparently mugged in New York City in 1981.
He had been mugged at least once before.
It was right down near Delancey Street. He was catching a train. And the thugs threw him through the plate glass window to take his leather jacket. And then they were mad dogging him and talking trash at him as he was on the ground, and he felt completely impotent. I think that's when all of a sudden Bernhard Goetz said never again.
At Goetz's apartment building in Manhattan, there were many clues to the suspect's behavior. One acquaintance described him as obsessed with cleaning up the neighborhood.
Those who worked alongside Mr. Goetz say he was especially concerned about crime, drugs, and the appearances of the street.
That's Bernhard Goetz' sentiment. That's where he's coming from. That's his mindset. He wasn't going to be a victim any longer.
It is a fight-back spirit that Bernhard Goetz allegedly took to the extreme.
No, this is not a marquee promoting Charles Bronson's movie of the 1970s. Rather, it's a sign in congratulating Bernhard Goetz.
People felt empowered. Yeah, we all gotta do that. We all gotta fight. You know, people talking craziness.
Yeah, you have Dirty Harry, you have Death Wish, you have all these different revenge fantasies that are usually from a white male perspective anyway.
Both the fictional Charles Bronson narrative and the real Bernie Goetz case played on the same fear that black people were predatory and white people had to be really, really careful.
Everybody feels that he's not a criminal, he's not a vigilante, and he's not Death Wish. He's only Bernie Goetz, a decent citizen that just tried to defend himself.
The Reverend Al Sharpton, a black leader, had a different interpretation.
I think that this legitimizes white vigilantism.
Black people said, oh, here it is. This guy gets to shoot 4 blacks, and white people would cheer him on like he's some kind of hero.
This is not a hero. This is a shooter.
4 kid black thugs, hero that had enough, that was in the story. So I'm saying, what do you mean? I'm gonna kill you over $5? And you're gonna make him a hero? The vigilante. the man fighting crime.
And actually, white people are like, yeah, don't you understand? We're getting victimized all the time.
What would you have done? That's all I'm saying.
What would you have done?
I would have defended myself.
I think that it makes black young people the sitting ducks of white paranoia.
You have black and brown New Yorkers who are saying, we get a bad rap every time. We can't just ride the train.
Do you feel now that young blacks will be so-called sitting ducks on the subways?
I think this is a racist society, and I think black people get treated one way, and white people get treated another.
And now pitting again whites versus blacks. Because who shows up? Al Sharpton.
Al Sharpton was provocative.
I do not want the city to give license to white vigilantes to shoot black kids that they suspect to be muggers on the subway.
He was aggressive. He was outspoken.
Because then we'll have to arm ourselves on both sides of New York, and we would have a second civil war in this city.
People say, Al Sharpton just want media. That's exactly what I want. That's what people call me for. Nobody calls me to keep a secret. They call me to blow it up.
There were a lot of people who stood behind him saying, finally, we have someone who's saying what we're thinking.
Bernhard Goetz, the accused Death Wish gunman, apparently kept his pledge to make the $50,000 bail on his own, despite hundreds of offers of support.
The flood of nationwide interest has been reflected in these letters.
Here's one contains approximately 5 checks. Thank Brother Goetz.
What happens when otherwise liberal and progressive white people start to get really, really afraid of black people?
This case is really more about deterioration in society than it is about me.
There is always a fear when you live in these urban areas of absolute chaos and pandemonium breaking out.
And you can see what fear does. It lionizes someone like Bernhard Goetz.
He represents white fear. They are after us. There's us against them, and I have to protect us.
Vernon Young has never been a victim of crime, but that doesn't mean he is not fearful of being victimized. If you were in the same situation, would you do the same thing?
I would have, yes.
The Death Wish gunman, Bernhard Goetz, will eventually go to trial, but the controversy as to whether he is right or wrong is likely to go on for quite a while.